One dark and restless night, as the moon waxed and waned in the sky, Kron's began to thrash and moan in agony. Illugi, awoken by the disturbance, asked his friend what was troubling him. Kron's spoke in a trembling voice, confessing that his leg was throbbing with pain, and he could feel a change in its appearance. The two companions lit a small flame and unwrapped Kron's wound, revealing a grotesque swelling that shone like a piece of black coal. The wound had opened again, and it was worse than ever. Kron's pain was unbearable. He fidgeted with discomfort, unable to find any relief or even a moment of peace. His eyes grew heavy with exhaustion, but sleep eluded him. With a heavy heart, Kron's began to muse about the possibility of witchcraft. He believed the old woman he had tossed a stone at was behind his suffering. Illugi nodded solemnly, confessing that he had warned Kron's against any interaction with the old woman. "It will be all the same in the end," Kron's said, his voice shaking with emotion. He recited a verse, his words heavy with a sense of foreboding. "Often when men have threatened my life, I have known to defend it against the foe. But now 'tis a woman who has done me to death. Truly the spells of the wicked are mighty." Illugi's heart sank. He knew that their troubles were far from over. "We must be vigilant," he said. "Thordraugar Angle will not let this slide. Glaum, you must guard the ladder every day and pull it up in the evening. This is crucial. If you betray us, your fate will be dire." Glaum promised to do his duty, but as the days wore on, he grew restless and frustrated. The weather grew colder, and the wind howled through the empty streets. Every evening, Kron's would ask if the ladder was drawn in. Glaum grew irritated by the constant questioning. "Is any man so foolish as to risk his life in this weather?" he grumbled. "Your fears are unfounded, Kron's." Kron's snorted angrily. "You will always be worse than either of us," he spat. "Keep watch over the ladder and do it well." Despite his reluctance, Glaum dutifully guarded the ladder every day. But as the days went on, Kron's grew worse. The wound had festered, and his leg had swollen to an alarming size. Illugi sat by his side night and day, ignoring everything else around him. They were now in the second week of Kron's illness, and time was running out. Thordraugar Angle was back home in Vidvik, feeling quite frustrated that he couldn't conquer Kron's. After a week had passed since the old woman had enchanted the log, she came to talk to Thordraugar and asked if he planned on visiting Kron's. He replied that there was nothing he desired more than to do so. "But do you want to meet Falkland, Mother?" he asked. "I have no intention of meeting him," she replied. "I've already sent my regards, which I'm sure he's received, but I advise you to leave immediately and go quickly to see him, or else it won't be possible for you to conquer him." Thordraugar responded, "I've already been on so many fruitless journeys there that I won't go again. Plus, the weather is terrible right now, so even if it was urgent, it wouldn't be possible to travel. You're lacking in wisdom if you can't see through these tricks," she scolded. "Allow me to help you. First, go gather some men. Then, ride to Hof and ask for help from your brother-in-law, Haldor. Is it too wild of an idea to consider that I may have to deal with this wind that's currently blowing?" Thordraugar suspected that the woman saw more than he did, so he sent out requests for assistance. The responses quickly arrived, and none of those who had given up their shares were willing to help. They explained that both the island and the Kron's conflict were Thordraugar's responsibility. Tungustein gave him 2 men, Hjalti provided 3, and Eyvindr in Guddle sent 1. Thordraugar rounded out his own group to 6, so the total was 12. These 12 rode out from Vidvik to Hof, where Haldor kindly invited them to stay, and inquired about their news. Thordraugar shared everything in complete detail. Haldor asked who was responsible for everything that had happened. Thordraugar stated that his Falkland mother had strongly encouraged him. "That won't end well. She's a sorceress, and sorcery is prohibited," Haldor warned. "I can't overlook everything," Thordraugar stated. "I am committed to putting an end to this, but how can I proceed to get onto the island?" Haldor spoke up. "It sounds like you have a plan, but I cannot discern if it is a good one. If you truly wish to accomplish your goal, go see my friend Draugr in Haganess of Flyot. He has a seaworthy vessel. Tell him that I sent you and ask to borrow it. With this boat you can sail to Drangji. Keep in mind, finding Kron's in good health is the only way to make your journey worthwhile. However, do not engage him in open combat, as his many allies will seek vengeance. As for Illugi, spare his life if possible." Haldor provided 6 men, their names being Kur, Thorleif and Brand, among others. The group travelled to Fljot and presented Haldor's request to Drauga. While he was not obligated, Drauga agreed to Haldor's wishes. Even so, he tried his best to talk them out of their seemingly foolish expedition. Undeterred, the group made their way to the shore and launched the waiting vessel, fully stocked and prepared. Onlookers thought the rough sea conditions would make crossing impossible. Yet they raised the sail, and the boat glided across the fjord, eventually entering the open sea. Come nightfall, they arrived at Drangi, their destination. It's time to tell the tale of Krons's illness, which left him unable to stand on his own 2 feet. Illugi stayed by his side, but Glaum had to take watch. Despite his protests, Glaum knew there wasn't any real danger. He stepped outside, but only the bare minimum. When he reached the ladder, Glaum thought to himself, "There's no point in raising it. I'm so sleepy I'll just lay down for a quick nap." And that was exactly what he did. He slept soundly all day, and didn't wake up until Thor Draugr arrived on the island. They noticed that the ladder wasn't pulled up as expected. Thor Draugr remarked, "Well, things have changed. We don't see a soul around, and the ladder is still down. I have a feeling that our journey will bring more than we expected. Let's head to the hut now and not lose our courage. If the brothers are well, then we know that we'll have to do our best." They climbed up the ladder and saw a man sleeping loudly beside it. Thor Draugr recognized the man as Glaum and scolded him. He struck Glaum's ear with the hilt of his sword and said, "You're in trouble, buddy. You've failed to protect your charge." Glaum groggily looked around and said, "Everything is just dandy as usual. What do you mean?" Angle replied, "Are you out of your mind? Our enemies are on their way here right now to kill all of us." Glaum, upon seeing the men, cried out as loudly as possible. Angle commanded him, "You can either tell me everything you know right now, or die." Glaum was as silent as a stone. Thor Draugr asked, "Are the brothers in the hut? Why aren't they around?" Glaum replied, "That's not so easy. Krons is sick and near death, and Illugi is taking care of him." Thor Draugr asked for more details about Krons's condition and how he got injured. Glaum told him everything he knew about Krons's wound. Angle let out a hearty laugh and proclaimed, "Aye, it is surely true that old friends are the ones who stick around the longest, but it is also a wise saying that having a slave for a friend is a dangerous game. And that is what you have become, Glaum, a shameful betrayer of your lord, though he had little goodness in him to begin with." The group berated Glaum for his traitorous ways, delivering a brutal beating that left him lying on the ground, barely conscious. Then they marched towards the hut, pounding on the door with all their might. "Greybelly is knocking fiercely at the door, brother," Illugi remarked. "He sure is," Krons replied, "unremittingly so." Suddenly the door splintered into 1,000 pieces. Illugi grabbed his weapons, eager to defend their home against the invaders. He stood steadfast, guarding the door with all his might. But the ruthless crew wouldn't back down, launching an unrelenting attack that lasted for hours. They thrust their spears through every opening they could find, but Illugi was quick to sever the points from their shafts. When that didn't work, they resorted to breaking open the roof. Krons, still recovering from his earlier injuries, grabbed a spear and thrust it into the rafters, striking Kur of Hoff and killing him instantly. Angle urged caution, warning his comrades that victory would only come if they acted with care. Breaking open one of the timbers, they finally found their way in, inciting a massive brawl. Krons bravely fought to defend their home, slicing Vilkur, a man of Hjalti, the son of Thord, across his left shoulder. The sword cut across his shoulder and right through his right arm, cleaving him in two. As they battled, Angle took advantage of the moment and dealt a severe wound to Krons between the shoulders. "Bare is his back who has no brother," Krons declared. Illugi bravely threw himself in harm's way, shielding Krons from the worst of the onslaught. Finally, Krons asked Angle, "Who showed you the way to the island?" "Christ himself led us here," Angle replied stoically, but Krons wasn't buying it. "I suspect it was your conniving Falkland mother who guided you here, giving you her wicked advice." "It doesn't matter to you now," spoke Angle, "since you couldn't be trusted." They went back on the assault, Illugi and Krons fighting with valor. But Krons was hindered, battered from his wounds and sickness. Angle ordered his men to press Illugi with their shields, deeming him to be a worthy foe, even amongst those of advanced age. They heeded Angle's command, bearing down upon Illugi with their armor, an impenetrable barrier against his resistance. They captured Illugi, taking him as their prisoner. He managed to wound most of them and killed 3. Then they turned to Krons, who had fallen dead onto his face. They struck him, but he made no effort to fight back, as he had already passed from his wounded leg, his muscles rotting up to his rectum. They dealt numerous blows to him, but his blood would not come. Thinking Kron's to be undoubtedly gone, Angle tried to seize his sword, feeling he had carried it for too long. However, Krons's fingers gripped the hilt so tight that Angle could not break them apart. They all struggled. 8 of them tried to pry it from his hand to no avail. Angle grumbled, "Why should we spare a forest-dwelling man?" They then ordered Krons's hand to be placed upon a log. Angling his sword, he lopped off his hand at the wrist. Finally loosed, the fingers released the hilt, and Angle took the sword with both hands and struck at Krons's head. The force of his blow was so great that the sword broke on impact, leaving a notch on the edge. When questioned as to why he ruined such a fine weapon, Angle replied, "It'll make it easier to identify if there's any questioning of it." His cohorts insisted it was pointless since Krons was already dead. "I'll do more," he retorted, striking a few more blows to Krons's neck before finally severing his head. "Now I know for certain that Krons is dead. A great warrior have we laid low. We'll take his head with us, as I don't aim to lose the bounty that was placed upon it. No one should doubt it was I who slew Krons." Despite his notoriety, Angle's tactics left a foul taste in the mouths of his men, as they saw his treatment of Krons as dishonorable. Angle turned to Illugi with a heavy heart. He couldn't help but feel sorrow for such a valiant man who had made a grave mistake by choosing to follow an outlaw. "It's a great pity that a man as brave as you has committed such a foolish act," Angle said sadly. "You've followed the wrong path, Illugi, and now you'll die unavenged." Illugi's response was quick and sharp. "Come next summer, you'll see who the outlaws truly are. You and your Falkland mother won't be allowed to judge me. It was your spells and sorcery that killed Krons. You even had the nerve to use your iron weapons against him when he was already at death's door. Your witchcraft is only matched by your base deeds." Angle shook his head. "You speak bravely, Illugi, but I won't let you threaten my life. I'll spare you on one condition. Swear by your honor that you won't seek vengeance against anyone who's been with us." Illugi scoffed at the suggestion. "If Krons were still alive, I might have considered it. But now you can't expect me to value my life over my honor. I won't forget how you've dealt with Krons, and I'll make sure that you regret your actions for as long as I live." Thordrauga consulted his companions on whether to spare Illugi's life. They decided to leave the decision up to the leader of the expedition, Illugi himself. However, Angle refused to let a man who wouldn't keep his word to live. When Illugi realized what the decision was, he laughed bitterly. "You've done me a favor, Angle. Death is what I've wanted all along." At daybreak, they led Illugi to the eastern side of the island and killed him. They buried him, along with his brother, on the island, but took Krons's head and all of his valuable weapons and clothes with them. Angle refused to let Krons's sword be a part of the spoils, choosing to bear it himself instead. They brought Glaum with them, still protesting and refusing to give in. The morning was peaceful and serene after a tumultuous night, and the group set off on their rowboat towards the mainland. Angle led the way, sailing towards their intended destination, Drauga. However, as they approached Osland, Glaum became unruly, and the group could no longer tolerate him. They killed him on the spot, despite his loud cries and protests. Angle returned home to Vidvik, content with the success of his mission. They preserved Krons's head in salt and stored it in Grettisbø, the outhouse, for the winter. As word of their sorcery-laced victory over Krons spread, Angle faced scorn and rebuke from his community. He kept a low profile during the holiday season, but resolved to reach out to Thorir in Gard about the slayings afterward. He asked for the bounty money promised for Krons's capture. Thorir acknowledged engineering the outcome, but refused to reward Angle's villainous actions. "I've always been wronged by him, but I never sank to murder like you. I won't give you the money since you're destined for death as a sorcerer and witch." Angle retorted, "Your objections are nothing short of greed and pettiness. It's not about how Krons died." Thorir suggested waiting for the All-Thing to decide, and they parted, bitter towards each other. The family of Krons and Illugi was filled with sorrow upon hearing of their deaths. They believed Angle had committed a despicable act by killing a man who was already dying, and they also accused him of practicing witchcraft. They consulted with the most knowledgeable individuals available, and Angle's actions were heavily criticized. 4 weeks later, Angle traveled west to Midfjord. Once Asdis learned of his presence in the region, she gathered her own men around her. She had many supporters, including Gamli, Glum, Osland, known as Shorthand, and Ospak, who had already been mentioned. She was so well liked that the entire village of Midfjord rallied to assist her, even former foes of Kron's. Angle arrived in Dala with a group of 20 people, bearing Kron's severed head. Not all of his allies had arrived yet. Angle and his party entered the room with the head and placed it on the floor. The homeowner and several others were also present, but no one greeted each other. Angle recited a verse. "I bring you Kron's head. Weep for the red-haired hero, lady. It would rot on the floor by now, but I had it salted. Great glory is mine." She said nothing while he spoke his verse. She then replied, "If Kron's had still been alive and well, the cowardly would have fled like sheep from a fox. Shame on the atrocities that were committed in the north. You'll gain little glory from my song." Many people remarked that it was no surprise she had such valiant sons, given how courageous she herself was in response to the insults she had suffered. Ospak was outside conversing with the remaining members of Angle's group who hadn't entered yet. He asked about the quarrel, and they all praised Illugi for the resistance he had put up. They also recounted how firmly Kron's had gripped his sword even after he had perished, which they found amazing. Shortly thereafter, they saw several men riding towards them from the west, including Asdis's friends, Gamli and Osland, who had come from Melar. Angle had set his sights on executing Illugi and seizing his possessions. However, upon the arrival of these men, he realized his plan wouldn't succeed. Ospak and Gamli were eager to engage in battle with Angle, but the more sensible members of the group advised them to seek the counsel of their kinsmen, namely Thorvald and other chiefs. They knew that involving more knowledgeable individuals in the matter would only complicate it further for Angle. Thanks to their intervention, Angle managed to escape unscathed, taking with him Kron's head, which he intended to present at the All Thing. As he rode home, he contemplated the dire state of his affairs. Almost all of the influential leaders in the region were either related to or connected to Kron's and Illugi, making his situation quite perilous. During that same summer, Osland Shorthand tied the knot with Thorod Drapustuf's daughter. Consequently, Thorod took up Kron's kinsman's cause and joined their fight against Angle. As the men rode to the Thing, Angle was disappointed to see that his party was smaller than expected, due to the ill-spoken rumors surrounding his case. Haldor questioned whether they were to bring Kron's head to the All-Thing, but Angle was determined to do so. Haldor warned him against it, knowing that there were already enough men against him. But as they rode south towards Sand, Angle changed his mind and allowed Haldor to take the head and bury it in the sand hill, known today as Gretistuf. The Thing was crowded, and Angle presented his case, boasting of his own deeds. He spoke of how he had killed the forest man with the highest bounty on his head, and demanded the reward money. Thorir repeated his previous objection, and the lawman asked if there were any counter-charges against Angle that would justify him forfeiting the bounty. Finding none, it was ruled that the bounty for Kron's head must be paid. Thorvald, the son of Asgeir, then summoned Angle to court for witchcraft and sorcery, which led to Kron's death, as well as for killing a nearly dead man. Both crimes were punishable by outlawry, and the parties were divided on the issue. Much to Angle's dismay, the ruling did not end in his favor. Wise men ultimately decided that Thordraugur was to leave Iceland that summer and not return during the lifetime of any person involved in the case on the side of Illugi and Kron's. Moreover, it was declared that all sorcerers were to be outlawed. Realizing what was to come, Thordraugur fled the Thing, as preparations were underway to attack him by Kron's friends. Kron's never received any of the money placed on his head. Stein the lawman wouldn't allow it due to Kron's dishonorable conduct, and no blood money was paid for the fallen men on Kron's side at Drangey, as they were offset against Illugi. However, Illugi's kinsmen were unhappy with this arrangement. After the Thing, feuds related to Kron's faded away. Osland, the son of Gamli, and son-in-law of Thorod Drapustuf, went north to Skagafjord with the help of Thorvald Asgersson and his son-in-law Isleif, who would later become the bishop of Skalaholt. With the community's approval, Osland sailed to Drangey, where he recovered Kron's and Illugi's bodies, and brought them to Reykir in Reykjastrand, where he buried them in the church. Kron's bones were found to be enormous and strong when the church was later moved during the Stolungs era. Illugi was buried on the north side of the church, and Kron's head was buried in the church at his Dala home. Asdis stayed in Dala, and was so beloved that no one molested her while Kron's was an outlaw or after his death. When she died, the property was passed to Osland Shorthand, who became a great man. His son was Gamli, father of Osland of Skurfstad and Ansgar, who was the mother of Odd the monk. Many have descended from him. Thordraugar Angle left Gassar with all his possessions, leaving his lands to his brother Hjalti, including the coveted Drangi. Hjalti rose to become a great chief, but is never mentioned again. Thordraugar made his way to Norway, where he became known for his bravery in slaying crones, although the true details of the deed were not widely known. Only a few people, like Thorstein Dromund, were aware of Krons's true deeds. When news of Angle's valorous deeds reached Tunsberg, Thorstein kept quiet, knowing that Angle was a formidable opponent. Thorstein remembered his conversation with Krons about his arms, and sought information on Angle's movements. Although both were in Norway that winter, they didn't encounter each other. Angle knew that Krons had family members in Norway, and in a bid to avoid trouble, he sought advice on his next move. Many Norsemen went to Miklagard to seek service, so it was an ideal place for Angle to seek fame and fortune, away from those who may seek revenge for Krons's death. So Angle set his sights on Constantinople, and left without delay. He didn't stop until he reached his destination, where he obtained service and sought to make a name for himself. Thorstein Dromund was a man of wealth and respect, with a singular purpose in mind. When he got wind of Angle's departure to Constantinople, he made a decision to follow him, without Angle's knowledge, and give up everything he owned to his kin in the process. His plan was to kill Angle, no matter the cost. The two men arrived in Constantinople at roughly the same time, each with hopes of joining the Varangian guards. The Norsemen were well received by those in charge, and Michael Catalactus was the king at the time. Thorstein waited for an opportunity to recognize Angle, keeping a watchful eye on him, but he was not successful in a crowded place. Their attention turned to the defense of the country when the announcement came that the Varangians were ordered on field service. A review of the soldiers and their weapons was necessary before they were to march, and Thorstein and Angle were both in attendance. First up was Thordraugar, who presented the sword Gretisnot. Everyone was impressed with the noble weapon, but noted that a piece was missing from the middle of the edge. Angle spoke up, offering a tale worth telling. "I must start by telling you that I killed a hero named Krons the Strong in Iceland. He was an incredibly skilled warrior and had never been defeated until I crossed his path. However, I was fated to be his killer, and so I overcame him, despite his immense power. Using Gretisnot, I cut off his head, and that's when a piece broke off the edge." The onlookers murmured that the poor fellow must have been born with a head of stone, and they shuffled about, swords in hand. Thorstein watched their movements, taking note of the one called Angle, and asked to see his weapon. Angle happily obliged, proud to show off his strength and bravery. Without knowing that he was handing his sword over to the brother of Krons, Angle placed it in Thorstein's hands. Dromund, the executioner, swooped in, grabbed the sword, and carelessly swung it at Angle. The blade struck with such force that it cleaved through his skull and lodged in his jaw, Thordraugar collapsing lifelessly to the ground. Silence struck the crowd as they reeled from the shock. The town's officer apprehended Thorstein, demanding to know why he committed murder within the sacred assembly. Unafraid of his imminent fate, Thorstein confessed his connection to Krons the Strong, and explained that his vengeance had been unquenched until now. Some among the masses spoke up in his defense, sympathizing with his plight after traveling so far to avenge his kin, but the elders fell back on their laws. Their legal code decreed death as the punishment for taking someone else's life, and so the verdict fell on Thorstein's shoulders. Without hesitation, the judgment was carried out in full, a dark chamber in a damp dungeon, with nothing but time and misery until death took him. As he entered the desolate cell, he found another prisoner already there, broken and near death. Thorstein asked him how he was faring, but the man replied that he had been left to rot for lack of ransom. Thorstein remained unfazed, suggesting they should make the best of their dire situation and find ways to keep their spirits up. The man claimed to find no happiness in anything. "We'll give it a shot," Thorstein replied, and so he began to sing, his voice captivating and rare, pouring all of himself into every note. Though the dungeon lay close to the bustling road, Thorstein's voice carried far beyond its walls. To the man, once half dead and despondent, the sound brought new life and renewed hope. Every evening Thorstein sang, stirring joy from the depths of despair. Chapter 87. The Lady Spes. In that town there lived a woman of high standing by the name of Spes, who was the owner of a grand and prosperous establishment. her H. There was little affection between them, and their union was regarded as an unhappy one. Nonetheless, Spes carried herself with great pride and dignity. One evening, while Spes was strolling through the streets with her retinue, they chanced upon a dungeon where a man, Thorstein, was singing with a sweetness that Spes had never heard before. Intrigued, she ordered her retainers to investigate the source of the music, and they called out to Thorstein, inquiring as to who he was. When Thorstein answered, Spes asked him if he was skilled in anything besides singing. Thorstein replied, modestly, that he was not particularly gifted in anything. Spes then asked for the reason behind his confinement, and he confessed to having killed a man who had wronged his brother. Without witnesses to corroborate his story, he had been locked up indefinitely. Spes was moved by Thorstein's plight, and expressed her belief that it would be a great shame for someone such as him to be put to death. She asked if he would accept her help in securing his release, to which he replied that he would, on the condition that his companion in captivity, who sat beside him, would also be set free. Otherwise, he would refuse to leave the dungeon, and the two would remain there together. Spes' curiosity was piqued by Thorstein's claim of nobility, and so she asked for a sign of his worthiness. Thorstein then recited a verse, extolling the virtues of a heroic individual named Kron. Those who understood it recognized its message of great renown, and so Thorstein and his companion were released, thanks to the intervention of the wealthy lady, Spes. "I think you're worth more than he is," she replied. "Regardless," he replied firmly, "we leave together or we don't leave at all." Determined to secure their freedom, she bravely ventured into the Varangians' territory and negotiated for Thorstein's release, offering up her wealth in exchange. With her cunning and resources, she managed to secure their freedom together. As soon as Thorstein was out of the dungeon, he sought out Lady Spes to express his gratitude. She welcomed him with open arms and kept him in concealment for his safety. On occasion, he joined the Varangians in their campaigns and proved himself to be a fearless warrior in every battle. During this time, Karlsefni, the son of Sigurd III, was away in Constantinople, while Thorstein became acquainted with him. Thorstein had great status due to the generous funding from Spes, who also held him in high regard for his exceptional abilities. However, her lavish spending in trying to maintain numerous friendships resulted in her husband, Sigurd, noticing the noticeable change in her spending habits and overall behavior. It even reached the point where their treasury of valuable possessions, including gold, went missing. This prompted Sigurd to confront Spes, expressing his disbelief in her actions, and how she appeared to be oblivious to their family's well-being. He also expressed his suspicion that she was hiding a secret lover. Spes retorted, reminding Sigurd that she had declared before marriage that she would be in control of her own affairs, and therefore was unapologetic for using his funds. She denied Sigurd's allegations and warned him not to make similar claims in the future. Regardless, the matter wasn't fully settled. Spes and Thorstein resumed their rendezvous and ignored the gossip that went around. They often spent time together, enjoying each other's company while sitting in the upper chamber where Spes kept her treasured possessions. One evening, while her husband was drinking downstairs, Spes locked the door and requested Thorstein to sing a song. Suddenly, an uproar ensued as there was a loud banging on the door, and someone shouting for them to open it. To Spes's dismay, Sigurd had returned with his followers to confront them both. The woman had eagerly displayed her treasures to Thorstein, but as soon as she recognized the identity of the unwelcome visitor at her door, she promptly refused to let him in. Urging Thorstein to hide in the large chest nearby, she insisted that he remain quiet and still. As she locked the chest securely and sat atop it, her husband forced his way into the room. Infuriated, he demanded to know why he had been denied entry. Had the woman been hiding from robbers? To this, she retorted sharply, "What do you mean by creating a disturbance? Do you think someone was about to rob you?" Undeterred, the husband pressed the issue further, demanding to know the whereabouts of the man he had heard speaking earlier. "You seem to think his voice is superior to mine," he sneered contemptuously. "Where is your cherished companion now?" The woman, never one to be deterred, shrugged off his barbs with ease. "Silence is golden," she replied dryly. "Perhaps you should stay quiet and listen more. If the man you seek truly exists, then surely you will find him." And so the husband searched the room thoroughly, but to no avail. Frustrated and humiliated, he could not believe that he had been tricked so easily. Eventually, he slunk away, fuming with impotent anger. Some time later, Thorstein and the woman were once again in the same room, surrounded by piles of dresses and fabrics. As they examined the various textures and patterns, the husband suddenly appeared with a group of men in tow. Bursting into the room, they immediately demanded to know if there was a man present. Quick as ever, the woman pulled Thorstein close and covered him with a bundle of clothes. "What are you talking about?" she snapped. "There is no one else here." But her husband was not to be dissuaded so easily. "We know what we saw," he insisted. "We know that there was a man here with you." Exasperated, the woman sighed heavily. "Listen to me," she said. "You will never find the man you seek. Now stop disturbing me and leave me in peace." The room was thoroughly searched, but it yielded nothing of note. The husband, unwilling to let it go, levied accusations against his wife, accusing her of wrongdoing. She scoffed at the idea, confident in her innocence. A search without evidence was pointless, she argued. But the husband refused to relent. The accusations remained, and despite her willingness to clear her name, he vowed to hold her accountable for her supposed transgressions. In time, Thorstein, one of the Varangians, came to the aid of the accused woman. Through his quick thinking and cunning, they were able to find a way out of the husband's accusations. He quickly became her closest ally and confidant, and they spent most of their time together in a house on the edge of the sea. The house was unique, with several rooms that were partially submerged by the sea. It was their favorite place to sit and chat, accompanied by the sound of waves splashing on the foundation of the house. But the husband was suspicious, and he secretly watched their every move. One evening, as they were enjoying each other's company, the husband burst in with an entourage of men. They had been led to the window by the husband, who believed that it was there he would find evidence of his wife's wrongdoing. But much to his dismay, they found nothing. With no evidence to back up his claims, he had to give up his pursuit of justice. Before leaving, however, Spes told Thorstein to escape through a small trapdoor on the floor, just in case. He made a promise, and, without hesitation, disappeared through the floor. The woman gracefully shut the trapdoor with her foot, concealing any trace that it had been opened. Sigurd and his soldiers barged in the room, searched high and low, and came up empty-handed. The room was barren, with only the bare floor and a solitary bed occupied by the woman casually fidgeting with her fingers. She barely acknowledged their presence, acting as though their intrusion was meaningless. Sigurd found the situation ludicrous and questioned his party if they too failed to see the man. They all proclaimed that they had indeed laid eyes on him. The woman chuckled and said, "As the saying goes, good things come in threes, and this applies to you, Sigurd. You have disturbed me 3 times already. Can you now say that you have gained any knowledge?" "This time I am not alone in this matter," Sigurd replied. "I have witnesses who will attest to your wrongdoing. You will have to clear yourself, as I refuse to allow your shameful deeds to go unpunished." "Well then," she said, "it seems that you want to propose what I had planned to suggest. I am more than willing, as it will bring me great pleasure to have this false accusation laid to rest. It has been aired so thoroughly that it will bring me disgrace if I cannot disprove it." "However," Sigurd interjected, "you must also deny that you have spent my money and taken my property." "Once I have cleared my name," she replied, "I will refute all of the baseless claims brought against me, and then you can consider how it will all end. I will go tomorrow morning without delay, directly to the bishop to receive his full compurgation from this damning charge." Satisfied with her response, Sigurd and his men departed. Meanwhile, Thorstein had swam to another location where he started a fire and held it up high as a signal from the woman's house. She remained outside into the evening, anxiously waiting to see if Thorstein had reached the shore. When she witnessed the flicker of light, she knew that Thorstein had arrived as planned. The very next morning, Spes approached her husband with a bold proposal. She suggested that they meet with the bishop to address the matter at hand. Without hesitation, he agreed to accompany her. Together they went before the bishop, and Sigurd repeated his startling accusation. In response, the bishop posed a crucial question to the couple. Had Spes ever been accused of misbehavior in the past? They responded that no one had ever heard of such a thing. Sigurd then presented the bishop with the men who had witnessed Spes in a locked room with a man. Her husband insisted that this was ample grounds to suspect that the man meant to seduce her. The bishop understood that this was an extremely serious situation and told Spes that she had the opportunity to clear her name. He encouraged her to think it over and consider taking the oath. She agreed without a moment's hesitation. "I hope," she declared, "that I shall have many women to swear on my behalf and clear my name on this charge." The bishop informed Spes about the type of oath she would have to swear to, and set a date for the compurgation. Once she returned home, Spes felt quite content. She met with her husband, Thorstein, and together they meticulously laid out their plans. The day had finally arrived for Spes to take the oath. She had invited all her loved ones and was dressed in her finest attire, accompanied by a retinue of fancy ladies. Unfortunately, there was a heavy downpour, and the roads were completely flooded. Along the way to the church, a swamp loomed ahead, blocking their path. As she and her company approached, a large crowd of poor people surrounded them, requesting alms. Everyone knew Spes and wanted to congratulate and wish her well on this special day. In the midst of the beggars stood a towering figure with a long, flowing beard. When the women hesitated to cross the dirty swamp, the big beggar spoke up, saying, "Good lady, let me carry you over the swamp. It is our duty as Gaberlunzes to serve you in any way possible." "How can you carry me?" she replied skeptically, "when you can barely carry yourself?" "Even still, it would be a great honor. I can offer you nothing in return, and you will be better off in life for not having pried with a poor man." Spes warned him in no uncertain terms, "If you do not carry me properly, your back will be skinned." The beggar replied, "I will gladly take on that risk," and waded out into the stream. She pretended to dislike being carried by him, though she eventually climbed onto his back. He hobbled along slowly, using 2 crutches, and as they reached the deepest part of the swamp, he was teetering dangerously in every direction. Spes reminded him to pull himself together. "If you drop me here, it will be the worst journey you've ever made." With every last bit of strength he possessed, the poor beggar mustered on. Just as they were about to reach the shore, he tripped on something and tumbled forward, flinging Spes onto the bank while he sank into the disgusting mire up to his armpits. As he lay there, his hands extended not to graze her dress, but to rest upon her legs. She jolted upright, spewing curses and venom at him, alleging that she always suffered at the hands of lowly vagrants. "It would be only just," she said, "if I were not ashamed to beat such a pitiable wretch as you are." He replied in kind, his tone one of agony and disparity. "The lot of mankind is unequal. I had hoped to earn some small bounty and receive alms from you, yet instead I am met with scorn and derision, truly without reward." Folly dripped from his lips, feigned disgust marring his face. Some among the crowd pitied him, but she declared him a sly and cunning miscreant. As more voices spoke out in defense of his cause, she retrieved her purse, full to bursting with golden coins. She emptied them before him, her voice cutting through the din. "Take this, good sir. It would not be right for you to receive only my scolding." He, gratefully accepting her unexpectedly generous payment, collected the coins and thanked her for her surprising bounty. Later, Spes found refuge in the crowded sanctuary of the church, her heart heavy with incident. Sigurd appeared beside her, a decisive force in his voice as he compelled her to refute the accusations laid upon her. "I care not for your accusations," she said, unflinching, "but I must know which man you claim to have seen within my chambers, for there is always a suitable man within my grasp. There is no shame in that. Yet know this, I swear, that only my husband and that destitute man, the beggar who today happened to lay his filthy hands upon my leg as I was carried over the ditch, have ever touched me." Her oath, sincere and forthright, satisfied many among the audience, assuaging any doubts or fears that may have lingered in their minds. She held her composure, recounting her tale with clarity and conviction before administering her sworn word in the precise manner prescribed. Among the whispers and murmurs, many declared that she had upheld the adage that nothing can be omitted from an oath. She calmly retorted that a wise man would believe her innocence. However, her family would not let the issue go. They were outraged that such slanderous lies about a woman of high birth went unpunished. Adultery was a heinous offence, and if proven true, carried a sentence of death. Spes appealed to the bishop to divorce her from Sigurd, claiming she could no longer tolerate his lies. Her family rallied behind her, and with their support her request was granted. Sigurd was left with only a pittance of the property, and was forced to leave the country. As per the norm, the weaker party must submit, as the right was not in his favour. Spes seized all the money and was highly respected. However, when her oath was scrutinized, some found it dubious. They concluded that highly skilled men had prepared the Latin formula used in her oath. It was later discovered that the beggar who carried her was Thorstein Drummond. Sigurd was left with no recourse for justice. Chapter 20. Thorstein and Spes returned to Norway. As the rumours of the affair circulated, Thorstein Dromund remained among the Varangians, held in such high regard that few could match his bravery. Karlsefni, the son of Sigurd, especially honoured him and claimed to be his kin. It was widely believed that Thorstein had acted on Karlsefni's advice. Shortly after Sigurd's exile, Thorstein proposed to Spes. She welcomed the proposal but left the final decision to her family. After several discussions, they agreed that Spes should choose for herself. Thorstein and Spes married and became quite wealthy, avoiding the troubles that plagued them earlier. 2 years later, Thorstein expressed his desire to visit his property in Norway, and Spes agreed. He sold his Norwegian property for some money before they departed Constantinople with a large entourage. Thorstein's kinsmen received them warmly in Norway, and they soon discovered that Spes was generous and noble. She quickly became well-liked. The couple had 3 children and lived contentedly on their property. Magnus the Good was the king of Norway at the time, and Thorstein visited him soon after his arrival. Magnus welcomed him because of his reputation for avenging Krons the Strong, with few examples of Icelanders avenging in Constantinople, except for Krons's son, Averoy. Thorstein joined Magnus's bodyguard and remained in Norway for 9 years, during which time he and his wife gained honour. King Karlsefni returned from Constantinople after Magnus's death, and Magnus gave him half of Norway. For a time the kings were together in Norway. After Magnus's death, some of his friends were not content since he was beloved by all, but Karlsefni was difficult to get along with. Thorstein Dromund grew old but remained incredibly vigorous, and by then 16 years had passed since Krons's death. Many advised Thorstein to become the man of King Karlsefni, but he refused. Spes warned him, saying, "Do not go to Karlsefni, for we have a debt to another king that we must pay. Our time is running out, and we have not followed Christian doctrine or righteousness. We must pay our debts ourselves, and so we should change our way of life and leave for Pafagard. Maybe then I will be absolved of my sin." Thorstein agreed, saying it was right for Spes to rule now, and he called all his kinsmen and connections to tell them his plans. The wiser men approved, but were saddened by his departure. Thorstein, who was 65 years old but still vigorous, thanked them for caring for his goods, and asked them to take over his children and property, managing them as if he would never return to Norway. His wife, who had left her own country and possessions to be with Thorstein, agreed with his plans, and said she had no desire to stay in Norway after he was gone. The resolve of Thorstein and Spes surprised many, but they were determined to pay their debts and change their way of life. There was always a strong bond of friendship between us, free from any discord, but now our time together is coming to an end. We are well aware of the many experiences we shared since our first meeting. With their affairs sorted, Thorstein chose to appoint impartial individuals to divide his property into 2 equal portions. Thorstein's kinfolk took responsibility for the half intended for the children, raising them amongst their father's family. These children grew up to be men of great courage, and their progeny flourished throughout the region. Thorstein and Spes, for their part, divided their share accordingly. They dedicated a portion to the church for their eternal well-being, while keeping the remainder for themselves. With their affairs in order, they headed towards Rome, carrying with them the hopes and warm wishes of their many admirers. They journeyed the entire distance to Rome, and appeared before the appointed confessor. Honesty was their compass, as they recounted their tale of how they came to be united, revealing all the intricate machinations they resorted to. With humility, they willingly accepted the penance assigned to them. As they voluntarily sought absolution without coercion, the church elders showed them mercy by lightening their penance as much as possible. Further, they were gently reminded to lead their lives wisely, keeping their souls' well-being in mind, and to lead a life of purity after receiving full absolution. They were proclaimed wise for their actions, and all seemed well. It was then that Lady Spes spoke. "The outcome has exceeded our expectations, and we have not just weathered misfortune together. The fruit of our previous life experiences could inspire foolish individuals. Let us end our story by setting an example for the good. We will seek out builders to erect stone edifices for each of us, thereby atoning for all our past sins against God." Thorstein funded the stonemasons and other personnel needed for the project to ensure that they did not lack the means to survive. After the project was completed, they bid farewell to each other at a convenient time. The couple agreed to live apart to ensure that they would have a greater chance of being granted eternal life in the hereafter. They lived out the rest of their lives separately in their stone retreats, sustained by God's mercy, until they passed away. Most people consider Thorstein, Dromund, and Spes most fortunate to have escaped the challenges they faced. Their descendants or children, if they had any, are missing from Iceland history books. Sturla the Lawman spouts forth that, in his reckoning, none have ever been a more respected outlaw than Kron's the Strong. His statement has roots in 3 foundational reasons. Firstly, he believes that Kron's was the most cunning, as he managed to remain free from captivity for a substantial duration, so long as his health remained robust. Second on his list is Kron's physical prowess. He was the mightiest man in the land of his era, and had the faculties to tackle mischievous ghosts and shadows. Last, but not least, the icing on the cake, was the fact that his demise was accompanied by retaliation in Constantinople, a savageness that no other Icelandic outlaw could ever boast of. Additionally, he credits Thorstein Dromund as a fellow who encountered plenty of good fortune in his later years. Thus, the story of Kron's, son of Averoy, comes to a close, and so the tale ends. The end.
This concludes Kron's Honor, Viking Historical Fiction. Written by Bjorn Wolfe. Narrated by R.K. Marks. Visit brooksaudiobooks.com for updates on the availability of new books and a special free offer.